Ever nailed the requirements only to have the business say, this is not what I wanted? Today, we dive into the top 10 ways business analysts miss the mark, even when they've ticked every box.
The Better Business Analysis Institute
presents the Better Business Analysis podcast with
Benjamin Walsh.
To the Better Business Analysis podcast with your host, Benjamin Walsh. If you haven't added me on LinkedIn, feel free to do so. It's always great to connect to my listeners. And some of you go out of your way to send me a message about how much value you get from the podcast. I love it. Keep doing it. This week, we are talking about the top 10 ways BAs miss the mark, even when the requirements are done right. Number 10 mistake that we make as BAs is thinking that the requirements are the same as expectations. And this is something that I guess the Agile revolution was trying to address. But expectations change all the time, and they have lots of multifaceted reasons for doing so, mainly political sometimes in an organization. So just to be really clear, requirements are what stakeholders say and you elicitate out of them. So you apply logic to what they're asking for and you elicitate those requirements. You find out what you think they need, right? But expectations are what they believe, goes deeper. When a client might say, we need to report on student attendance, the expectation in their mind, and this is a real life example here in New Zealand, might be real-time visibility or whether it's mobile friendly. They haven't asked for any of that. That's not part of the requirements that they said to us. Requirements, even if you stoke them for their shopping list, some of those things might not come out. And you might deliver a Power BI report in our case, or a static spreadsheet that's uploaded onto a website. And technically it's right. I mean, literally it meets the need. And you've done all the right things by not, delivering too much. You've just invested enough value. But maybe that's not their expectation, even though it practically meets the needs. So you've just got to be really clear that you get to the root cause of the problem and bring them along so the expectations are very well-informed and brought down to a reality before you start. Number 9 is that it's the not surfacing of the unspoken need, right? And this is where elicitation, where a junior moves on to a medium BA when they can start poking the fire and getting out the really good stuff. Stakeholders won't always tell you what they really want. They expect you to dig. So yes, there's expectations, which are the beliefs. And now we get into the practical. This is elicitation. This is exactly what this point is. And the user asks for a drop-down field. What they really need is a lookup that's maintained centrally to avoid human error. So again, recently we've sort of said we need a list. We need a list of codes. And this is what they're going to be. The solution is enforced. What you really need to understand is what are you going to be using it for? What do you want it? And what is the purpose of that step in the user's journey? And you might find that actually a drop-down field is not quite right. What about multi-select of those who are technically minded? Maybe you want to choose more than one thing. I was on a project years ago when I had the idea of a kind of a drop-down or a selection type box. I gave that in to a designer as part of the requirements process. And, didn't think it was necessarily the only requirement. Maybe there were other things that the user needed along their journey. And actually the interface that was designed, which did meet the overall expectations of our end customers, it wasn't a drop-down box at all. It was kind of filled in as you typed. And yes, it was fundamentally a controller of some description, but it was actually limited, and a drop-down box would have been really boring. And the target demographic we're going after were people looking to study at university. And what we actually created was something that was almost a sentence that they were creating on the fly. And if you think about the next leap now, maybe AI is better to generate a sentence structure. So, for example, a chat prompt may be better than just limiting people to some options. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. Number 8 is ignoring the emotional drivers. You need to have really high EQ to be a great BA, okay, a better BA. Business decisions are emotional. They are. You can have the smartest people in the room, they're emotional. Some of the best people out there, they make emotional decisions. And yes, we try and say that we want to cut that out. That's of business, and it should all be fact driven. There is always emotion. It's either power or fear, legacy, reputation, fear from stakeholders. There's emotion behind it. Caring, not caring, selfishness. If you don't know who feels what, you'll deliver features no one uses. You need to understand their emotional cues, and an empathy map is great for that. You look at an example here. An ops manager may block the rollout of an auto scheduling tool because it threatens their role. Not because it won't work, not because it won't make things more effective. So there is an emotional element here, and this dips into emotions and politics. But just want to start with emotions, and then we'll look at some of the other challenges we have. Number 7 is, again, just assuming that stakeholders know what they want. They don't. That's actually your job. If you talk to a stakeholder, and this happens often, and they might say, hey, look, just copy what the other system does. We just want something that works that way. Instead, ask, why did that work? What didn't work? You need to create from need, not past nostalgia or an idea about how something else went in the past. Okay, so people, especially this happens quite a lot in executive teams, and I've spoken about before, is that they really remember the things go really well or not so well. And IT projects are sometimes lumped into the not so well category, and they'll remember that. And then if things do go well, they'll say, oh, look, we did this thing at this company and we just want to have a copy of that. And you're like, are you sure you do? So that's what they remember. And we are solution mode a lot of times in business. We do think about solutions. So you need to accept that and work backwards with them and use the 5 whys and find out what they're trying to achieve, the problem statement. The other one that I stress on about, you'll hear me talk about this often, is that if there is no persona, there's no context. If you haven't defined the personas you're going after, the customer personas, the user personas, you don't really have true context. You don't really know who you're trying to help or support, or what their needs are on some of those other elements we talked about. What are they generally want in life? What is their emotional state? What's their past decision-making apparatus? What's their political play in the organization? And what's their lived experience? And then that will help you. If you deliver a workflow that works perfectly on a desktop, it could be the fact that the field staff are mobile only. Game over. Or they need fast internet. It's not going to work over, for example, I don't know, some bad internet connection in the middle of nowhere, right? This happens a lot. That particular problem happens a lot. I think a lot of people have been bitten by the old field services problem, where they've developed something that works great internally in the office, they roll it out, and there's too grunty or heavy for a mobile device, or the mobile device doesn't support it, it's not mobile friendly, or they can't data entry all the stuff you wanted them to enter from the field because it's just too much information to enter on a screen on a mobile phone, but central office wants it. This is a common problem. Number 5 is forgetting that the BA's job is translation. Okay. The simplest way to describe a BA, if you ask anyone, is that we translate the needs of the business into technical talk. I still use that definition if people ask me what a BA does. And we need to make it really clear that we're not the note taker, but we are the translator between business need and solution reality. It's even a better way of saying it. So business need and what's the reality and the logic behind it. Processes is another word that comes up there. Gets a requirement around showing student risk indicators on a report. But what are the indicators? What are they for? Do they be color-coded, drill down? The BA may have left it vague. And I guess the fix here is to translate the outcome and the usage context clearly, right? So you're not over prescribing this. I do feel like sometimes developers get to a point where they don't get enough information, so they just want a lot. But it's actually better to work with them, bring them on board and say, this is the outcome, this is the usage context, and you show it, and you don't just say it, and then they can have a piece of the pie. They can be part of the solution. And if you're too prescriptive, then, as I said before, with the drop-down box example, the designer was the person who made it a reality, and they know more than I do because I'm not a designer. There's a funny example in my life at the moment where I literally drew on via a Teams meeting. There's a whiteboard app you can plug in, and I drew very badly with my mouse a graph that I thought would add value for a project. And it was really bad looking graph, right? Literally drew a line down, left, with the L shape of the curve, put some badly written labels on the right, and just showed this trend line I wanted in the stacks, and I named them. And I was in a call with the supplier, with one of the architects there, and we were talking about the report that we wanted. And that mock-up, not even a mock-up, that napkin drawn idea that I had months before was in the requirements, and they were talking about it. And it's really funny because I hadn't over-engineered it, but they got it because of the great engagement by architect, by the conversations that tech lead was having with them, the additional context we gave. That's all they needed, right? And they didn't want me to, let's dictate what the report should look like. They're the experts. Okay, so you just got to remember that as a BA. Sometimes, so I'm guilty of it. Sometimes just expect, you feel like you have to micromanage the delivery of it, right? And sometimes BAs have to do that to salvage a project if things are going badly. But on a highly productive team, we've got trust, and everyone knows their role. That may be enough. The napkin approach may be enough. And it makes me smile. I laughed and I smiled. I was a little bit embarrassed, but it worked. Okay. Number 4 is the over-reliance on Agile ceremonies. And this is a problem. This is one of the things that, people keep saying Agile's dead. And it probably is. The capital A is probably dead. Just because you're in Jira doesn't mean it's understood. Agile rituals don't replace BA thinking. Product owner is not a BA, okay? It's a different role. It's within the Agile realm. Now, yes, the product owner defined at your organization may well be called a product owner and may well require all the BA skills that a BA has. But that's not the Agile version of it, okay? Because Agile talks about the delivery. Scrum talks about the delivery side of things, not necessarily the upfront analysis that starts before delivery. So if there's an example of, as a user, I want to log on, whatever, so that I can, there's no mention of the fact that it needs to be 2FA, session expiry, password reset flows. It's a lazy story, and it's a bad result because the BA logic is missing. And in addition, the business rules, which those are under the requirement. And there are various ways we can do this, which we've discussed through description, through acceptance criteria, through additional documentation, not documentation with a capital D, small documentation, a business rule spreadsheet. These are great ways we do it. And of course, then what connecting flow, you don't get flow and sequence. You get that from process diagrams. And then you get context from context diagrams and drawings. And you get ideas from mock-ups and more kind of, I guess, conceptual reality, visuals. And in addition to that, you get the upfront enterprise and strategic analysis, which is the why are we doing this, the PESTLE analysis, the whys, the problem statement. So that all the additional things, I've just blighted them all out there for you, that BAs do, that are not part of the Agile delivery. That's not part of it. That's Agile deliveries later. Number 3 is not managing stakeholder alignment. And this is a problem. And this is where the capital P politics comes into play. You can't just document the requirements and do all those great things we just talked about. You actually have to align people. And say marketing wants speed and finance wants compliance, and you document both. The dev team may be stuck in the middle if you've been lazy and you haven't worked that out before the Agile delivery. You need to facilitate decisions, highlight when there needs to be a decision made to governance groups. And don't just capture opinions, okay? This is what finance said. This is what marketing wants, and let the developer do that. It's a waste of time for them. The well-oiled delivery machine, you don't want those guys to be focused on that. You're asking them to do your job or the governance team's job. Number 2 is that you need to trace all your requirements, all the things you do to true business value. I'm hot on this. Doesn't happen often. So it's no traceability to business value is number 2. Building features or things without mapping value is where BAs die quiet deaths. They really do. So the example is you build 20 custom fields. No one knows what they're used for. They're not labeled well. They clutter the UI and they just deliver no insight because someone asked you to collect that information. They wanted more data because it was the data team. This happens often now. You need to link every requirement to the business objective, okay? You need to do that via the epic in my mind. And if you've got features, then they may be grouped into features as well. And you need to do that ruthlessly. If there isn't the business value, and there may be a product owner you're working with or a business owner, depending on flavors, they need to understand the value too, so they can grade and prioritize. Not just about how much effort's going to be involved. It's not a scrum thing. It's what's the value to the business. And number 1 is not testing for meaningful use. Validation isn't just UAT passed. Does this help someone do their job better? Can the job to be done? Can they do it better? BA might sign off a dashboard, users never open it. The insight might be the fact that it takes 5 clicks to get to where I want it to be because you had to negotiate requirements and this is the mess you got in. Being a BA is not easy. Being a better BA is even harder. You need to ask someone, show me how you would use this. And that's why mockups are useful. So you can actually show the flow all the way through and show them and I guess play back to them is even more importantly, this is what you're asking for. Is this what you meant? Right? And then if there is negotiations, because there are with developers, they might go, well, it's hard to do that. This is how we've done it previously. This is where it's going to be. You're like, well, if they're going to pay you to do a little bit more to do it this way, is that okay? Or that might not, if that's the only way we can do it, I'm going to go back and tell the product owner, business owner that this is what they're going to get and just make sure that it's going to meet their expectations, which we started with here today. And if it isn't, and that's the only way, maybe they don't want it that way. Maybe they want to stop it. Maybe they don't want to invest. Don't be afraid of closing something down and saying no. Okay. I'm not saying no to the business owner. You're just saying, no, we shouldn't do it. It's my recommendation. Being a BA isn't about documenting what's said. It's about uncovering what matters, testing for meaning, and connecting people, problems, and possibilities. If you've ever built the right thing and still got it wrong, then this episode and these 10 points are for you. I'll see you next week.